The RTÉ Rugby Podcast, sponsored by Canterbury. See the new Irish men and women's rugby jerseys at canterbury.com.
Hello and welcome to the RTÉ Rugby Podcast. I'm Michael Glennon and I'm joined on the panel today by two-time Six Nations winner Fiona Hayes and former Ireland head coach Eddie O'Sullivan. How are you doing today, guys? Hope it's nice and sunny wherever you are in the world.
Changeable.
Yeah, that's true. Fab in Cork anyway.
Very good. It's nice enough in here in the Midlands as well. We've got a good bit to get through today and we'll look at the Heineken Champions Cup a bit later on, but we're going to start off with the TikTok Women's Six Nations. It was said here, there and everywhere that this was a must-win game, Fiona. I kind of get the feeling with what's to come, Ireland probably would have taken a win of any description, but we actually got a bit more. We got a much improved performance and a bonus point win with 4 tries, 29-8.
29-8, that's it, Michael. It was definitely, I thought the second half in particular was exciting rugby. I thought the girls let loose. There was some good tries. I think the first half they kind of felt their way through the game. There was a bit there was errors, but for me the most exciting thing about the whole thing was that scrum looked well and truly solid. They looked I know John Fogarty had been in with them during the week because Rob Sweeney was away, the scrum coach, and it just looked like the togetherness, the tightness, that it really bodes well going into against an English scrum that are absolutely dominating teams.
Yeah, I mean, it'll go up another level as well. Eddie, what did you make of the improvement? Was it very visible from a coach's point of view of things coming together in terms of set pieces and a reduction in handling errors as well?
Yeah, I think it was a much better performance, no question about that, and the dividends are on the scoreboard. Like we said last week, that the bottom line would be here that they could do nothing unless the set piece got sorted out, and the scrum had been a bugbear for them. So once they got a better platform, to play off of, I think that's a big factor. And I think you saw the results of that. Also, I think once they kind of got a bit of daylight to themselves in Italy, they relaxed a bit. There was a lot of pressure on them going in. Like going into a must-win game is a lot of pressure, like for how you dice it. And it was must win. We said it as well. If they'd lost Italy, it would be very grim for them for the rest of the championship. And they could talk about that again if you want to. But so for that reason, the combination of pressure, I think once they got kind of a bit of daylight in the second half, you saw them relaxing and they played much better. And that's not unusual, but it's good to see that because that just feeds their confidence in terms of what they're doing, And it's just a kind of a confirmation that they're happy with what they're trying to do. And when they get a bit of time on the ball and they cut down the errors, they execute well. So it's a massive shot in the arm in terms of their confidence. Even no matter what happens at the back end of the champ, because there's other factors at play here. They've had a really good performance. They've done a really good job in putting an Italian team, who if you got it wrong against Italy, they would beat them. We know that. There was no gimme by any stretch. So I think that's a real plus for them.
Fiona, it was certainly no gimme, and Ireland have always had good tussles with Italy in the past and their pack. Could you identify some of the technical issues that were better in the scrum in terms of front row or cohesion? What did you see there as a former prop?
Yeah, I think that what I saw definitely was the cohesion issue. I noticed in the previous game against France, there was a slight split in the second row at a time, which can add pressure to that front row. The biggest thing that I saw was height change. I had highlighted a couple of clips before and looking at it, and Linda seemed to be slightly, Dujan seemed to be slightly higher, which in turn brought up Niamh Jones and probably Katie Dwyer at the time. But you have to compliment Hanny as well, tight head that came in. She was absolutely solid. You could see the Italian were targeting that area, but she held the pressure, and I think that's when Ireland got that dominance. They synced a bit lower. Their setup looked really nice. As I said, they were far more cohesive. The second rows, you could see the power coming through. We didn't see that before from that split in the second rows. You could see the power coming through, and because they were so low, their leg drive gave them dominance at times, and they won quite a few penalties as well, which probably there was advantage and the ref, and they played on to that. But I would think they would go away really happy from that. And it was just simple little things that they fixed. Height, how they probably binded. Another thing that I noticed as well was the bind was much tighter from both props as well, which locked down the arms, and it gave the Italians no room to come and attack Ireland.
Yeah, no, actually, and Christy Haney was a first start as well. It was great. I noticed that maybe the most delight from the tries was Niamh Jones' try. So she put the ball into the line out. Ireland caught the ball, which was, which is a big thing because they struggled the last day with that, and drove on through. And it was a try like we've seen Cliona Maloney get in the past as well. And if there was some criticism of Niamh Jones, it was the set piece. So, I mean, you could see that was a big goal they were working on, and it was great for them to come off, for it to come off.
Yeah, Michael, and you know what as well, like if you looked at a lot of the lineups, there were very simple, basic things. They got in, I spoke about that before, that if the movement wasn't working out, you need to be quick. You need to be quick up the ground. You go in, you don't put pressure on your hooker, and you try and get up the front. And I think that's where they got a lot of change. It might have to change against England because they will be quite dominant in reading the lineups that we saw from that game. But Niamh Jones, under savage pressure, media, everyone talking about Cliona Maloney, but what we don't understand about Niamh Jones is, although sometimes, at the set piece, it mightn't be her fault, it might be the lifts were off or whatever, but her dominant tackles throughout the game were absolutely immense. And she's been like that from the start of the campaign. We've looked at her set piece, but we haven't looked at her work rate around the pitch. And she's impressed me. She's a quiet girl. She just goes about her business. She'd never tell you that she's got the best throw. She knows she's constantly working on that and working on her set piece. And you could see the team, they're absolutely delighted for her. And that's what you want. That they know they can hear the outside noise. They don't care. And she went out and put out that big performance. And I'm absolutely delighted for her as well.
Eddie, we know Greg McWilliams, what the project he has taken on, and he's decided on this mantra in Níarca Curla Kayla, there's no strength without unity. I wonder how much that will be tested now, because it's nobody's fault or whatever, this is the way the system is, but we will have now, a good chunk of the team departing to play a sevens tournament. And, that's divisive just by itself. It's inherently divisive that you lose a lot of your players. I don't know if it's a poorly thought out mantra, because you can't really sell it after this. How do you say it really with a straight face? How do you, if this is what happens, if we lose, or if they lose some players over to the Canada tournament, how do you see the game playing out with more inexperienced players going over to this England team that are on won 21 matches over to Welford Road? What's the best that can be achieved?
I think they've got to focus on their own performance. The notion that they're going to lose, a number of players, key players, and then they're going to go away from home against England and, they're going to win. You've got to be realistic about it. I don't see that happening. It'll be a massive shock for it to beat England next week in the circumstances. So what you do in those situations is you stay focused on yourself. It's about what Ireland can do next weekend about their own performance. It's the old thing, what can Ireland control is to control their own performance. Now, for me, if I'm playing a team away from home that are stronger than me, and there's a good chance if they hit the straps, it could be an ugly day out. The most important thing is your defence. It's the old mantra of Bill Shankly. It starts at 0-all, don't let it get any worse. So defence is going to be key for them. And I would say most of the time this week, they're going to spend a lot of time on defence, and they may change up their defence. You might throw a curveball in there against England. You might go blitz on them sometimes, and you might go drift. So they're not sure what's coming at them. So you, excuse me, in those situations, you have to throw a bit of a curveball at a team that are feel they're superior to you.
Is that realistic, Eddie? Can you implement that in a week's training with new personnel? Yeah,
absolutely. That's what coaches are for.
Yeah,
you spend some time in it and you prioritize that, and there's certain things that you may not contest the ruck, because how many rucks are you going to win over 80 minutes against England unless you're 100% fire sure you're going to get on the ball and get a penalty? Let them have it and be in the line. And one or two extra defenders in a defensive line is massive.
Yeah.
People don't appreciate that. If you put two people into a ruck, that puts a lot of stress on your defensive line. And if that ball comes on quick, you're in big trouble. So small things like that. So I'm not going into a whole diatribe on defence, but that's really what it's about. It's having a strategy that's going to upset England when they have the ball if you can. And that could be change your defensive line speed. And that depends how many people you contest at the ruck, or whether you bother at all, or you just build the line and get off the line. So the other thing is you go back to, as Fiona said, their set piece. They've got to build on their set piece. The scrum is going to come under more pressure this week, no question about it. But the foundation last week was that if you go back to the stability of the scrum, is that the props were able to take the pressure that was coming at them, and that gave the second rows a platform to push on, and that meant the back rows could lock in the second rows, and suddenly it's a functioning scrum. You know, so you might come under pressure on their ball, as I said, we have to plan our own ball, secure your own ball, and that might be quick channel one ball away. You know, stuff like that, that you know you're going to come under pressure. You say, right, this week we're not going to keep the ball in the scrum, because if we get the ball stuck in the second row and they get a secondary drive, it could be very, very difficult for our front row. So we're talking about like 3-second scrums. Once we engage, ball goes in, ball away. So stuff like that gives you stuff that you can focus on in the game. And maybe a couple of scrums go wrong, and you circle out and say, hold on a minute, let's go back to what we said we'd do here. So they're the things you can fix. And then when you have the ball, you're going to come under more pressure on their defensive line. We saw the mistakes that we had against France. So maybe dial down what we're trying to do with the ball. You know, take pressure off players, give them just simpler rolling plays, and make sure we keep the ball. The one thing for sure is if we have the ball, England can't score. So they're the kind of things you look at in terms of building a game plan against a team that are nailed on to beat you. And then maybe after 20 minutes, they're not pulling away, or after 30 minutes, or half time, you're still in the game. And it goes into the second half, and then the dynamics change. So that's how you got to approach those games. I mean, I've faced that when you're going away to play the All Blacks in New Zealand. You know, you've got to go through this process in the build up to those games, because they're different challenges. Yeah. And you're looking to overturn a team that's rated higher than you. So that's where you start. And it comes back, as John said, to the nuts and bolts of not throwing two people into a ruck that's ending. And then your defensive line is skinny. So it's a tough week's work, but it's a fantastic challenge, because if they manage to put together a game plan that delivers that sort of traction in the game, and even if they lose, they look back and say, that was a great performance. We set out our stall here. We said we do A, B, C, and D, and we pretty much got it done. And we still lost, but that's a huge building block to the next game. So that's how you develop teams in going forward. It's these steps you take even under when you know the result is going against you, and that to me is the key of terms of now you have that buy-in you talked about, that coming together, right? Or whoever's on the field.
Yeah.
There's no point in complaining about the people who aren't there. Yeah. But the people who are in the field are buying into the way of doing this, and this is the next challenge is against England. So that to me is the whole mechanics and dynamics and psychology around it.
Fiona, when Eddie's talking there about the ruck discipline, and that I'm wondering if they lose the voices that they have, because you can hear Stacey Flood on the field, and Dorothy Wall is not shy and retiring as well if she goes. Do the people who come in, I mean, it's very important that they see that early, they identify it, but they have to have a communication skill. Do you think what's coming as backup, or Nicole Cronin, or if Catherine Dane says, or do you think they will be able to take that over? Because the communication it stops people having to make tackles if they're closing gaps. I mean, that's a vital part of it, starting off. Is that there in the backup?
Yeah, Michael. So Greg has been really clever in what he's done as well. So we saw him integrate Catherine Dane, and we saw Hannah O'Connor start this in the last game. They would be two leaders on that team. They would be quite vocal. We saw them get in. I'd imagine Dorothy will stay. Okay. I think it will be more the back line will be depleted. I thought Catherine Dane was excellent. So he's got them in. He got Aoibhinn Riley her game. She probably will go away now. He's got Catherine Dane back in there. You've Enya Breen, who's been on the bench, who'll come into centre. I think they're quite vocal, and Eddie spoke about that. I watched the England-Wales game, and England didn't know what to do for the first 25 minutes because Wales slowed down their ball. They made absolute crap of their rucks. They got in there, and the Welsh do that. It was a different system than we'd seen them play against Ireland, but they literally got in there and slowed the ball. So Eddie talked about that, but it's about changing that up then, because as the game went on, obviously England dealt with that and they pulled away in the scoreboard. So if Ireland can get in, slow down ball, maybe change their defensive system, use the blitz, fan out, leave it. So it's trying to learn all those roles, and there's definitely the voices in there. Hannah O'Connor mightn't be loud, but she's very capable of spurring everyone on. Nicole Cronin is like a terrier at her foot, barking away. You can hear her roaring in that lovely Limerick accent. So they've got everyone there, and it's just, and he's kind of integrated correctly. It's how he's dealt with the likes of Emer Considine. I'm very curious to see going into this game. She would probably have to start, but she was dropped completely off the 23. So in his coaching skills, we'll see if she can come out and be confident in player. If she's not, then he'll probably have to look at what he's going to do when these sevens are going, because it is always probably going to happen for the next couple of years because we haven't got the player base, and it just is what it is. But it's very interesting to see, because I thought Bevan looked a bit depleted, Bevan, in the game. Her confidence was low. She wasn't the player we've seen. That could be on the back of injury, but I'd love to see her stay. I'd love to see her stay and get those 15 games. Whether that happens or not, I don't know. But it's interesting to see how all these dynamics come together.
Yeah, I normally throw out a crazy suggestion in these podcasts, but it's a World Cup year for the sevens. Is there any suggestion maybe that Aidan McNulty could expand his player base by bringing up some of the underage players, sending them to Canada, getting them the experience that they will need later on for more vital qualifications? Keeping Baveen, keeping Stacey. You need the boot of Stacey, I would say, in Welford Road, that would really bolster that. Is that a crazy thing? That I know these are contracted players. The tournament, you could fly them out a day later. I mean, because the tournament is not in until the Scottish weekend. I know they need the preparation. Is that a crazy thing that doesn't make any sense?
Michael, that's absolutely crazy. No, of course it is, because we love the game of 15s. They're contracted to 7, so that's their priority. Yeah. I agree with you. I think the likes of Stacey and Lucy would probably have to stick with that 7s just to get the younger players, but maybe less going over, maybe holding on to a few here, and you get the younger. There's a lot of 7s girls up training, getting them some game time, but I'm sure they've talked about that. Aidan McNulty has been doing really well, and we saw the 7s girls, so I'm sure they've discussed that, and they'd be looking to win these competitions as well. So he wants his best team going forward as well. So it's a battle for these talented little players.
Yeah, and an honourable mention to the men's 7s in Singapore. Actually, like really heartbreaking stuff. It was a try with 30 seconds to go, and a try then a minute and a half into added time. Really hard luck, but it was a great performance to beat Fiji for the first time. So we'll just honourable mention to those guys. And they'll obviously have more games coming up. We're going to turn to the Champions Cup, and we'll just bring in the Graham Rowntree news, because it was confirmed yesterday that Graham Rowntree would be taking over from Johan van Graan at the end of the season with Munster. It was kind of a protracted, scenario where it'd been a long time coming. It had dragged on and on. Eddie, would you read much into that? Do you think Munster had their eye on a bigger name and couldn't get it over the line for some reason, and that's why? Is it settling with Graham Rowntree? Even though I believe he's very popular down there, and he has great experience and is well regarded.
Hard to know for sure, but I think the giveaway was he got a 2-year contract. I think it was earlier or late last year.
Yeah.
So that kind of put him in the driving seat, really. I mean, I thought that was the tip that he was going to take over, and then it dragged on so long. You got to wonder what's going on here. If they kind of showed their hand that by reappointing him. Now, they're obviously very happy with Graham. I know he's very popular. He's kind of he appeals to players because he's an old school type of guy. Yeah. So he's approachable, and he seems to like Limerick. He seems to bed it in there. So I think maybe this was the plan all along. But what I am confused about, and you're right, is why it was so agonizingly slow and dragged out in getting there. I don't understand that, but the bottom line is now it's done, which is a good thing that it's done. Now you can look at his appointment. It's a potential double-edged sword. Like if you look at it, you have to say he's got a lot of experience. He knows Munster, he knows Limerick, he knows the players. That's somebody. There's not going to be no sweep and change in terms of a new brush sweep and clean. Like he's well known. The advantage of that is he knows the problems there. He knows the system. He knows how it works. That's the upside. The other side of that is that for next season, he has to find some way of moving the dial very quickly. He's not going to have a honeymoon period. There's no honeymoon for him, which is a fact of life, and he knows that. Like if you come in new from nowhere, people say, well, you got to give the guy 6 months to bed in and and their first season is almost a kind of let's suck it and see what happens, But I think for Graham, he's going to have to hit the ground running. And he's going to have to find a way to change the dynamics and move the dial. Like if we get to Christmas next year or this year and Munster haven't changed, there's not been a big shift in the way they're doing their business, he will come under a lot of pressure because people want to see an adjustment to how Munster carry out their business. I mean, like, let's be honest, that the attack is the big one at the moment that everyone's giving out about. If you look at, like we talked last week about getting beaten 4-1 in terms of tries in Town Park, was dreadful. And then even last week over in Exeter, like, they got a great result at the end, but it was based on the fact that effectively Exeter self-imploded at home. Like, Exeter blew, I would say definitely 3 tries they blew, and they could add another couple. And that would have made a very ugly scoreline. And then they doubled down with 2 silly, insane yellow cards. And that was the window Munster had to really make a statement. But Munster didn't really make a statement.
No, 5-3, they outscored them against 13 men. So that's not enough.
And that 5-pointer nearly went the other way for 7. Like, it was Henry Slade went for intercept and didn't get it. If he picked that off, it was sayonara, So, like, the big problem is, like, and I don't see the Munster attack changing by next weekend either, Like, no. It is what it is for the moment. So in the context of where I'm bringing this back to the context of Graham Rowntree taking over, he's got to find a way that next year when Munster run out at the start of the season, there's an obvious difference in the way they're doing their business when they have the ball in their hands, No, he's got to have a vision for that. He's got to know what he wants. He's the head coach. He's got to decide this is how we're going to do it. And then he's got to find somebody who's simpatico with his philosophy and get that person as an attack coach, implement that. And the players have to buy in as well.
Who's out there, Eddie? Who's out there? I mean, Mike Prendergast was linked before, and I mean, he's over in France now. I don't know his scenario there, but is it too late to get him in, or like, who's out there that?
It's not too late. I mean, it's not too late for anything because they don't have to arrive until the end of the season.
Yeah,
there is this window, but whether he can get Prendy back from Racing is another thing, because Prendy is doing a really great job there, and Racing are playing really well. Like, Racing won't want to let him go. And he's still in contract. So it's not as simple as giving Prendy a call and he hops on a plane.
Yeah.
There's a lot of moving parts there. So I don't know if that's possible. Even if Prendy wanted to come, he might be able to get out of his contract. That's just the business of sport. It's hard to know. You don't need a huge name. You need to find somebody who has a philosophy the players are going to buy into, and that's going to move the dial from. And Graham has got to have his own view as well of what that looks like. He's the head coach.
Yeah.
Like, you can't bring in a guy and say, well, what do you think yourself? Have a run there and see what happens. It doesn't work like that. Yeah. But he's got to have his own vision for what he wants. So he has a bit of time, though. That's the key thing, And I think whatever happens this season, Munster aren't going to change their colour in terms of how they attack. And it's been a bugbear, not just this season, but for a number of years.
Yeah.
I flagged this to start of the season, that Munster are fantastic from 15 metres out. And they are. I'm not being facetious. They're incredible strike rate. If they get in, if they get 10 metres from your goal line, they're going to get you.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10. But their problem is they can't get there unless you give away penalties.
Yes.
And if you give away penalties, and if Exeter get sloppy next weekend in Town Park and they give Munster entry to the kill zone, they'll kill them.
Yeah.
But I that's another discussion next weekend. But I think that's the Graham Rowntree discussion from my point of view.
And Fiona, Eddie touched on it there about the amount of chances that Exeter had. And I would say that over in this part of the world, we're very used to seeing various teams like Munster, Leinster especially, and Ireland getting into the 22 and coming away with scores. And as Eddie said, 3 or 4 times for various reasons, knock-ons, offsides, off their feet at the ruck, Exeter blew a chance to put that tie to bed. It could have been 15, 20 points. And if you take Keith Earl's tackle at the end into account as well. So a game they could have lost by 20 points, and a game they probably should have won by a score.
Yeah, look, that's what the game is about, isn't it? We look at that. I followed Exeter over, they started the season badly in England. They've come into their own. I thought they've been quite good in the last few games. But you have to pat the back of the Munster players. The likes of Murray, Jack O'Donoghue, Keith Earl's tackle. I mean, that's the pressure they're doing. They didn't go in as favourites. They had a last minute change of Zebo, Dermot Barron. There was a load of stuff gone wrong. And you don't obviously blame that because you've coached and staff and you should have enough players to come in and be able to take over the gauntlet. But I just thought Munster's grit, determination, which we've never doubted that they have, I thought it was quite exceptional very unusual for Exeter. They would be very disappointed. We know Rob Baxter spoke after the game. He wasn't happy with that performance. So I would imagine they're coming over to Thomond Park. They're going to be far more physical. They're going to be clinical. I think we have to take our hat off to Hodnett as well. I thought he done immense work around the breakdown. So you had guys like coming into their own. Character was questioned after that Leinster game. You know, they didn't feel good after it, you know, and you could see that in how they played. They held it together. They stayed in the game. You might argue they should have won it with the 13 men. When we went wide, it was probably too late. Got knocked back, maybe 10 metre. Eddie spoke about that 10 metre zone. It was probably not classic Munster at times in that area, whereas they should have maybe gone wide sooner when the space was there, when it was down to 13 men. But they'll go back and review it. And you know what? Thomond Park is a fortress. So I think we will see a different style. Attacking wise, I don't know. But players are starting to play, and hopefully we'll see it now in this game at Thomond Park, because it's the chance of getting into European Cup. This is what you want to be. Yeah. This is where you want to be playing. You don't want to be knocked out in these early stages. So I think we will see. Yeah. There's
a couple of things I would worry about next weekend, and you touched there with Fiona about Rob Baxter. Like I think he's a fantastic coach, Baxter, and the one thing he's created in Exeter is an incredible culture around the team. Like they're a no-nonsense team, Exeter, you know. And they won't be intimidated in Thomond Park. I think they'll be kicking themselves for last weekend, and they'll come to Thomond Park with a mission that they kind of let themselves down last week, and this is a place to put it right. So I worry about that these guys are not going to be intimidated on or off the field. The second thing is that worry me about Munster look very vulnerable defensively in the outside channels. And I don't want to blame Chris Farrell for this, but he's struggling at the moment. Now, a lot of the problems is what's happening inside him. Players are getting locked in on defenders, and they're not able to turn their shoulders and get out. And he's kind of left like on his own in the outside channel. We saw Leinster do it to him, and we saw Exeter do it to him last week. So that's a work on that Munster have to fix this week, because Leinster or Exeter are still going to do what worked for Exeter last week. They're going to do it again this week, and that's a lot of starter plays off the top. And really hard running lines on the inside channels, and seeking you make the read as to whether to turn your shoulders or bite down. Yeah. And Munster got that wrong a lot of the time. And that's where the chances came for Exeter, and they blew them. So Exeter are going to run that game plan pretty much again and just try and be more clinical. And Munster have to figure out defensively, particularly off some of the starters, how they're going to get the numbers right and get people able to fill channels. And that's the two things worry me. That like Exeter can burn you from 50 metres. Yeah. Especially with Hogg in their outside channel. If he gets free at all, like he's serious gas. So they can score 7 pointers in 50 metres. If they get a couple of those under their belt on Saturday, geez, that's a heavy hill to climb. And you won't roll Exeter over, because they're just not one of those teams that they actually embrace the intimidation. Yeah. And Eddie worries me.
Eddie, is that fixable? Like, because we've seen Farrell in the last couple of games and he's getting turned in. They're very narrow. Yeah. Is that defensive? Is that how Munster are playing, or is that him reading things wrong? Like, is that fixable in a week, say?
I don't want to hang around his neck, but I've always said the 13th position is the most difficult position in the field to defend, because you make a lot of key decisions. And a lot of it happens. You can't turn out and go unless the people inside you are giving you the push. So I think they need to figure out how they want to defend as a unit. That unit seems disjointed. There seems to be a lack of cohesion, a lack of communication, and with that comes a lack of confidence. You know, when you get opened up, there's nothing worse in the middle of the field as centre, or getting opened up 3 or 4 times. You go, well, you know, that's a real blow to our confidence, and we don't back ourselves. So it's very fixable, because a lot of the plays they're similar plays. They're those plays which run hard runners on the inside channels, but go out the back, or there's a wrap around. And you really have to be smart. They're not easy to defend. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying this is, but at this level, you've got to start fixing that. No, I would have, again, you know, going back to the preparation for the Irish women's team in England, this week will be a major factor, will be that midfield working as a unit, rep after rep after rep, and throwing different looks at them and trying to get them to make the right decisions at the key moments. Because they're last second decisions when the pass is made, whether you hit up or you turn out, but they're absolutely crucial. And at that level, with serious gas that they have in the outside channels with Exeter, you're going to pay a price. So that's very fixable, but it's not an easy fix, but it has to be dealt with.
They're going to be boosted, hopefully, by if they can get Peter O'Mahony back and Joey Carberry, and Simon Zebo might come in. Like, he's experienced as well, and he likes these European games. So hopefully, just a quick word on that. Which way do you think it would go? Who would you favour in that one, Eddie and Fiona, to go through?
I'm going to say Munster. I can't not
say
Munster.
Fiona, I'll move on there,
you know.
I want to say Munster as well, but I have a lingering concern that Exeter are hurting from last week and they want to make a point. But I think with someone like O'Mahony back and especially Zebo, who's an incredible striker, you know, if Zebo gets a shot, he'll score. Yeah, and they're the game changing moments. So I think, I'm leaning cautiously towards Munster, but I am worried about Exeter. It's not, they're one of the teams that you don't want to mess with, and we've poked the bear last week. Yeah, but it is, Fiona's right, it is Thomond Park. You know, it's a very hard place to come.
Most enjoyable game of the weekend for me, anyway, was Ulster Toulouse. Ulster went over there. They've already beaten Clermont over there this season. They're starting to walk the walk after a couple of seasons of talking the talk. Vermeulen doesn't hurt in there, and how he binds the team together without scoring the tries or making these spectacular plays. You can just see the influence he's having on them. I would have thought if the Ravenhill factor means that if Ulster went to Toulouse and came away with a draw or just even one score in, they would have fancied themselves back in Belfast. But there's a little bit of regret that they let in the late try. But I mean, it's still a stunning performance, actually, 26-20 against Toulouse. I know they went down to 14 players early on, but that's their fault at the end of the day as well.
There's a factor on Michael. There's a factor.
It is a factor, but I mean, it was a stupid. If you're a player, it was one of the stupidest.
I'm not defending the guy. It was a ridiculous play, but the fact is, Toulouse. I keep saying to people, a red card after 10 minutes is like playing with 7 yellow cards in a row. It is a massive. Now, I would just to go back where you were. You're 100% right. If you said to Dan McFarland, you'll come back to Belfast and you'll be leading. At halftime, you'll be leading at halftime. And I think that's it. I think Ulster will get this done. Yeah. And if they don't, they'll probably kick themselves because, it's a dream position for them. How they got the dream position is a different discussion, by the way. Yeah. But where they are is where they want to be. And I don't think they'll give horse to the mouth. They'll just take this on. Ravenhill is very difficult. The place will be rocking, and I back them to do this. Yeah. And I think there's some injury issues as well now in Toulouse. So they mightn't come as fully loaded as they were last week. Yeah. But anyway, the game itself, let's be honest, it was a great game, but they were very lucky again to get the result. And I really thought Toulouse played fantastic rugby at times. Yeah. When they'd only 14 men, they created overlaps. Creating overlaps with 14 men in the modern game is really, really difficult to do. And it came down to an intercept pass, and he didn't have to throw it. He could have hit Entomac, and Ulster were in a world of trouble if he hit Entomac, but he went for the long pass, and it got picked off by Balakoon, who, there was a case that he was after sneaking offside, but look, that's the way it works. So, it was that tight, and it was a funny game for that reason. But the bottom line is, at the end of it all, and I think Ulster did a great job getting the result, but I think they were lucky that the red card had a major factor in it. But having said that, they're in a great place. Yeah. So they'll never look a gift horse in the mouth. They've got the break. They took advantage. They're home. They have a lead at home. And I think if they let it slip now, they'll be kicking themselves for a long time.
Fiona, that Antoine Dupont guy, he blocked down, threw an intercept, knocked the ball on. I'm just wondering, because there was a lot of talk about how many of the Toulouse players went off to the French camp. There's an emotional toll there as well. I mean, it's not easy to get over the line, do the Grand Slam. It's great and it's a great boost, but it also must take something out of it. You can see that they're not flying in the top 14, and if it comes to it, the French teams are not. I know Toulouse have a great European tradition, but they still love their top 14, and it's much of a muchness. It can be much of a muchness. And what was your takeaway from that match? And do you think that Belfast would be a deciding factor or telling factor?
I think so. I think Ulster have made Ravenhill a hard place to go this year, especially in Europe. We've seen them. They're going to be confident. They could have lost it right at the death as well. You know, there was a beautiful break from the 22, and the sub scrum half, I think, knocked it on at the base. So look, Toulouse came off. They were typical French, you know, even in the press conference, Dupont was given out after still about the offside or whatever. So they're going to feel aggrieved as well. You know, they didn't seem too happy. There was no praise for Ulster. I think Ulster can fix a lot of things as well. They 35 missed tackles, would you believe, in that game, and lost 4 lineouts. So they have things that they can tighten up as well. I thought the pack were immense at times. I thought the power of Vermeulen, you know, is just a monster in there. But for me, I just thought McCluskey and Hume, that combination is working really, really well for Ulster. Yeah. You know, Burns is putting him into space. I think Hume is really getting McCluskey into these places, and we see how they like to attack. And they were exciting when they attacked, be it man down or not. I think Ulster are 6 points ahead. Toulouse are going to come over, feel aggrieved, and they're going to put everything into it. But Ulster at home are very, very hard, and this is a team that's really playing some nice rugby, and I think they will come away with the win. It'll be a very close game, but I think they will get that win.
Yeah, and it was nice to hear a bit of bitching from Toulouse and their fans as well, like just the booing and the whistling over the red card, which was ridiculous, and then the intercept. That was, I mean, it was very close either way. You know, you couldn't say he was clearly offside.
Yeah, I thought they were actually giving out, because when I was watching it live, because the guy was on the ground, was near the pass as well, but you wouldn't know. I know they were looking at offside, but there was a Toulouse guy down injured. Yeah. So, but he still threw the pass. Game on.
Robert Ballycoon didn't help himself by nearly slowing down. I suppose he can afford to, if anyone can afford to.
I think he was so shocked he thought that was... he made it thought he was offside, but anyway.
We'll
having said that, like, I mean, the French are never going to be happy. Like French crowds are never happy unless they're winning, you know, and they're always going to boo the referee, and they're always going to complain about everything. Every ruck they should get a penalty, every tackle. That's just how it is there, you know. Like, and that didn't surprise me in the least. But that's the atmosphere.
Good to see they're paying attention. Fiona and Eddie, do you have any tattoos of former players, former teammates, or have you any players that you coached, Eddie, that you decided to get a tattoo of?
No, I don't have any tattoos of anything or anybody.
No,
my body's a temple in my hall.
And you don't want to tell me about any of Fiona?
No, I'd say a few have a tattoo of me, all right, on their thighs. Although they have told me I've a face for radio, they told me, so I don't know. We actually got 3 front rows retired when we left Ireland. 3 of us, we called ourselves Fromance, a few of us, you know, that our silky skills. So we got a tattoo of 3 triangles. That's about the extent of it. Not my face anyway. No way.
Yeah, well, you can see where I'm going here. It was Matt Hansen.
Is this a crazy? I thought you already had your crazy question for the podcast.
Oh, sorry. No. It's
second one now, is it?
No. This is Mac Hansen, who revealed he had a tattoo on his thigh of Oisin Dowling. Would you believe? Of all players, of all of his teammates.
Too much information.
Too much. We showed it was on BT. He did a little section. So I think they just started having a bit of crack, and he said, "If you pay for it, I'll get it." So there's the rest of his life. Mac Hansen has Oisin Dowling's face on his thigh, and I suppose he's Connacht.
You might review that in 20 years' time.
Connacht for life now. So Leinster went over there. They had already put 40 points on Connacht twice this season. Connacht still in the game on paper. It was easily their best showing of the year. But I suppose a general feeling coming away from that game that Leinster have more room for improvement, Fiona, would you say? And the Aviva, a big home crowd, I don't know how much of an advantage the Aviva would be, considering Connacht gave up home advantage in the sports ground earlier this year to play Ulster there. So they like it. It might not be that much of a thing. To be a big crowd from Connacht there as well. But more room for improvement from Leinster, would you say?
Yeah, definitely kicking game as well. That old Connacht wind or whatever happens down there, we could see that on the kick, and Johnny was
Johnny's
looking up
face,
in the air, as well as getting the stick off Jack Carty with the ref. He was looking up in the air at the wind as well. But look, I thought it was a very physical encounter. I thought Bundy led from the front as well, tackle-wise. Leinster actually had like 590 metres gain. So they did get good ball, but it wasn't the usual Leinster performance that we'd seen, be it Connacht's defence was much better because, you know, that's where they have been getting caught out in those wide channels. Their defence was much better. I would say it'll be a far more polished game from Leinster next time. They'd beaten Munster obviously the week before, and they didn't look as cohesive as they usually look. And this is European rugby, so I would imagine in the Viva it'll be a different game we're looking at. But you have to take your hats off to Connacht coming away 5 points down. We saw Matt Hansen, John Porch, their silky feet. You know, they were just immense when they got the ball in hand. There was no big hits on them. They were able to move themselves around those tackles. So Connacht do have that X factor. It's just whether they can keep that Leinster team caught in, which they did for a lot of the game in Connacht, but I think it will be a different ball game next week.
Did you agree with that? Do you think Connacht, what are Connacht's chances? Because the general consensus is Leinster will just play their game and win, and they can run out 20-point winners.
That's a logical conclusion to come to, because I think Leinster, particularly in the first half, they looked like one pass away 4 or 5 times from wiping out Connacht out. Like there was one more pass, they were gone. And Leinster can score from like 50 meters as well. They have that capacity. They can get you from pretty much anywhere. So I think Connacht defended much better, and they scrambled very well also when they were under pressure. And I think they fed off the crowd. The crowd did bring that energy, which they knew was coming, and they did. Leinster looked a little bit rattled that, you know, those final passes weren't sticking for them. But I think the second half was probably Leinster had, which they tend to do at halftime. They circled the wagons. They came out, they were more focused. But the yellow card changed the game. Like that energized Connacht. Yeah. And they really fed off that, and they got the score. And suddenly it was game on. And I think Connacht turned the ball over when Gibson Park got on the field. Connacht were on the goal line, and you know, Leinster turned over the ball there and got out of jail. And Connacht scored there. That might have been it, you know, in the circumstances. But I'd say Connacht will be very happy with the performance. To be fair, you know, they left it all out there, and I think they know though it's a monumental task, because Leinster are going to learn as well from last week. Yeah. You know, they're going to see the things that nearly work from and fine-hone them. But I still think, look, Connacht have nothing to lose here. We all thought they were crazy going to Viva to play Ulster. Yeah. You know, earlier the season, giving up the home advantage in Sportsground, and they gave Ulster a good kicking, you know. And we're talking about Ulster now being, you know, talk of the walk, for what they've done. So there's fine margins there, but I just think that Leinster turned a team that learned from their misjudgments, and I think they'll be more dialed in this week. I just think it's hard to see it, but I think Connacht aren't unhappy where they are. No. No, and I think the yellow card was a factor. I think Connacht were beginning to struggle at that stage, and that gave them that, you know, breath of fresh air they needed to be able to go at Leinster and not have to defend as much, you know.
Can I get your take on that quickly? Because a couple of weeks ago, when the last time we were all on, we spoke about this black card or a 20-minute red card. Yeah. And would this be a kind of a prime example of an example?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, World Rugby are tying themselves in knots here, because the head of World Rugby came out last week and said, all these things will change, players will learn, we're confident all the cards will drop. And he came out yesterday and said, we have to start thinking about 20-minute yellow card. So he's done a 180 in a week. So
and now he's been cited as well. So Gibson Park, it looked as if the referee went through all the protocols.
It could have gone either way, right? I think the ref actually, to be fair, did the right thing. He looked at it in real time as well, which often when we slow these down, they look bad. They look worse. And people saying, Marmion had a bloody nose. Well, you can't give a yellow card everyone somebody that's a bloody nose in a rugby match. There'll be nobody left on the field. You can't, you know. So my point was, I think the referee got it right. He said, look, it was contact at head, but Gibson Park didn't initiate the contact by stepping up into the tackle. Yeah. And in that case, so if he pulled out a red, you would have said that's an extremely harsh red card. And he gave a yellow, you say he's lucky to get a yellow. And there are going to be those grey areas.
Yes. You spoke about that. And
you got to live with that. You got to live with that. And I think maybe in that scenario, if it was a case we had a black card, he could have pulled out a black card and said, look, you're gone for 20 and you find somebody else to replace you. That might be fair, but I think they need to get their hands on this, because despite what they're saying that this will work itself out, it's not working itself out. And we said last week, the game, they're not guys running around. And I can guarantee you that tackle from Gibson Park was a complete accident. Gibson Park did not go out to hit Kieran Marmion in the face.
Yeah.
No, there was one of the weekend where the hooker in France, like, guy out in the air.
Oh, yeah.
That was shocking. That's a red card. And it's a yellow card, and it's a black card. Like, this guy has a rap sheet the length of your arm, you know.
Yeah.
So, but then here's the irony: he got 11 weeks for that, like, which is ludicrous. Because 12 weeks was the top that they could give him. They dropped it to 10 because he kind of said, "Oh, I'm sorry," and then they bumped it up another one because of his rap sheet. Like, this guy's a serial offender. Like, again, there's mixed messages coming from the top as well, how they're dealing with this. And there's another horrendous one, a player taken out after making a pass. I think it was Breve. Breve player came across. Like, if you did it in the street, you'd be in jail. Like, it was a complete assault on the guy. It was a high tackle in the head, you know. So the problem they have as well is they're not dealing with the real cases strictly enough. Like, there's guys doing really bad things and getting, you know, fairly lenient sentences for it. So I think it's still a mess. So let's be honest, it's still a mess. And the problem is, let's hope that games aren't skewed or twisted or badly, you know, bad outcomes in games this week because of some, you know, minor infringement or an infringement that could go either way and it changes the game. But I think it's something World Rugby have to get their hands around quickly. And I understand why they're trying to fix this, because the concussion thing and the safety is paramount. But they're not getting it done at the moment. And it's a bit like World Rugby tend to work like a fire brigade. They go around putting out fires.
No, I mean,
front of things.
It's a funny one, because even deciding for Gibson Park and then to pass it, I mean, was it necessary to be cited? Who cited him? And then
the citing commissioner, what was he looking at? And then it gets thrown out.
Yeah, so I mean,
the irony of it all is that the giveaway was, and Andy Friend, to his credit, said after the game, I don't think that's a raid.
Exactly.
You know,
he did,
So, like, and credit to Andy Friend for saying that, but he's a straight up honest guy, and he said, "Look, I don't think that's a raid," because he will put himself in a position where if that was Kieran Marmion, he don't Kieran Marmion getting a raid, and coaches are smart enough like that, you know, that if they turn this into tip rugby, where are we going, you know?
Yeah, the head of the URC officials, Tappa Henning, he's doing some press next week, so he I guess he'll be questioned about this or how together everyone is.
I'm looking forward to that.
Okay, very good. Listen, Leinster v Connacht is live on RTÉ 2FM on Friday at 5:30. Munster v Exeter, there'll be updates on Saturday Sport on RTÉ Radio 1, and Ulster v Toulouse will have live coverage on RTÉ Radio 1. That's an 8 o'clock kickoff on Saturday evening. Today, I want to say thanks again to Fiona and Eddie for joining us on the podcast. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll chat to you next week.
The RTÉ Rugby Podcast, sponsored by Canterbury. See the new Irish men and women's rugby jerseys at canterbury.com.